All right, welcome back to the next video. Now, one thing I'd like to mention at the beginning is maybe you have seen that in the last video I had a little yellow notice there, apply steps. Do I want to apply the steps? So what I did is I simply saved my file, I closed it, and then I reopened it again, and now you can see that the message is gone. I'm not sure whether this is a bug, but sometimes it appears, and I clicked several times on applied, and it still showed up the message the whole time. So I simply saved my file and reopened it, and now the message is gone. So just in case you have the same issue, then please give this a try. Okay, so now let's continue. In the last video, we actually enriched our data with public data from the web. And now we need to do something very, very important. We need to make sure that our data model is correct. Because without our proper data model, nothing can be done in Power BI. So all the reporting, all the great visualizations you might have in mind and you will do in the future depend on the data model. So let's ensure first that this is set up correctly. To do this, we need to go inside the model view. So after importing our data, which we have done, and also cleaning the data we've done in the query editor, we now need to go to the third option here, the model view, click on it, and then you see a model something like that. So let me just zoom out maybe a little bit. So now it's a little bit more space and we don't need to scroll. You can either zoom out with your mouse wheel or also at the bottom here, you can see there's a plus minus here where you can zoom in and out inside the model. Now what this actually shows us is currently all the tables we have in our dataset. And you can also see that beside the tables, this time we have more than just one. Remember in our original first getting started, so the easy way, we only had one table, but this time we have several tables. And all of them are appearing here in the model view. Now by default, if you do not set this off, this is a feature in Power BI will try to detect relationships between tables. And this has already been done for some of the tables, and that's why they have this connection between them. For instance, this one here, if I hover over it, you can see that there's a connection between the product table and the product ID and the sales table and the product ID there. So what happens if you do not specify that this feature should not be enabled, so the auto detect of relationships, then Power BI is trying to figure out the relationships, and normally it does it by the names of the columns. The names of the columns in the tables. So you can see that we got product ID here, we got product ID there, and that's why it simply thought that the right connection is here from the product ID to the product ID. Before we dive deeper into that, let me just restructure the table. You can see you can drag and drop them around. And I personally like either this view, that I have my sales table, which is also called the facts table, with all the transactions in the middle, and my dimension tables, which are actually the tables I'm going to use to slice and dice my data inside the sales. I want to have them outside, so either like that, or I also prefer often that I drag the sales table, so my facts table, to the bottom and put all my dimension tables to the top. Like that. So it's up to you. It's not required. It does not change the model at all, but I personally like to have it in a structured way like this. So what we could also see is that, for instance, for the dates table here, we currently do not have a relationship to the sales table. And we need to set this up. Otherwise, Power BI will not be able to, for instance, choose a specific date and then show us only the sales for this specific date. That is not possible as long as we do not have a proper relationship here. Now, in order to create this relationship, we can easily do this by dragging and dropping fields. What I mean by that, I can take this column here, date column, and I can drag it and drop it on the order date, because this is the relationship I want to create. And that's probably also the case why Power BI did not pick this up automatically, because it's called date in our dates table and order date in the sales table. So this is not not the same, it's not equal, and that's why Power BI did not detect this relationship. But we can easily do this. Simply, again, click on the field here, so on the column, drag it and drop it on top of the specific column you want to create a relationship with. So in this case, the order date. I drop it here, and now you can see that now the relation is established. And if I hover over it, you can see that it's the date and the order date. In case the relation was set up incorrectly or you want to remove a relationship, you can simply right click here and you can delete it. Or you could also double click on a relationship, and then the edit relationship window opens, and it shows you exactly what the connection is. So in this case, it's picked up the sales table as the first table, but it doesn't matter. The point is, from the sales table, the order column is here selected, and in the dates table here, the date column is selected. And you can easily change this. For instance, I could simply, if I would like to connect, just an example, the order date to, for instance, here, the year column, I can simply then click this year column here, right? And now the relationship would be between those two columns. Of course, you can also see this relationship has cardinality, many-to-many, and so on. And also get a little warning icon here, but that's simply the case also because this here, of course, is not the correct relation. I just wanted to mention this. If you double click on a relationship, you can easily adjust from which column to which column the relationship should be connected, simply by selecting from the table. So first select the table you want to use, and then simply choose the column, and then choose the column from the other table. And you can see then this relationship is fine. Then you can specify the cardinality and then also the cross filter direction. Now, the cardinality refers to the fact of or how the columns are actually defined. Meaning, in my order date, that's why it's called many-to-one. In my order date, I have several rows where the transaction has happened on the same day. Meaning, for instance, here I have the, this is German date, but it means simply the 11th of January, 2023. So this means that, for instance, on this specific date, I might have several transactions. So that means that the date is appearing several times in various rows. On the date, however, each day is unique. That's the specific feature of our dates table, which this is a feature it has to have in order to be a proper dates table. So this means that many-to-one means we might have many entries for the same day in the sales table, but only one entry for this specific day in the dates table. That's why it's called many-to-one, or also star-to-one or n-to-one. These are also common names which you hear. For the cross-filter direction, this is currently set to single. That means that always, and that's best practice in Power BI, is that the one side filters the many or the star side. Let's just click OK for now. Let me show this to you. You see that there's a 1, there is a star, so that's the many side, and also the little arrow here. This indicates the filter direction. That means that right now we could select a specific date from the dates table in order to filter the sales table for the specific date. And this works because we have a relationship and the filter direction is going from the dimension table, this one, the dates table, to the so-called facts table or sales table. That's why it's single direction. And this is best practice. That also means that if the dates table here filters the sales table, the other way around does not work. So that means that the sales table from the many side, because the filter direction is here from the one to the many side, does on the other hand not filter the dates table. So you can't use, for instance, columns from the sales table in order to filter the dates table. That doesn't work because the relationship is one to many and the direction is from the one side to the many side. What you could do, and there are specific use cases where you want to do it, but most often you don't want to do it, but let me still show it to you. What you could do is you could double click here to open the relationship, and you could say, I want to use this as a both. So I want to filter in both directions. If you do this and click OK, you will see that now the arrow changes here. And this means you could now use inside the report. So if you go in here and create a visualization, you could filter from a column from the dates table. You can filter the sales table, you can filter the dates table. So this is possible if you set the relation like that. However, as I said before, you most often, in let's say 99% of cases, you don't want to do this. Best practice is a relation from the one side to the many side, and it's in a single direction. So that the one side, the dimension table, filters the facts table. Just keep this in mind, because if you work like that, in 99% of the cases, you're correct. And that's why in here, I don't want this. So I right click here, or let's actually double click here. And then I simply specify here, this is single direction. And the last one, make this relationship active. This just means that currently the relationship is active. If I untick this option, then the relationship is inactive. And you also see this visually. If I click OK, because now you can see this is a dotted line. It's not a solid line, it's a dotted line. And this means that currently this relation, it is in the model, but it is not active. And that means currently the dates table is not filtering the sales table, but we could force it by creating this inactive relationship and then use Power BI, so specifically DAX, so the formula language, in order within a calculation, make this relationship active. So also something we're going to explore later on in a DAX formula. But for now, just keep in mind, in order to filter the data by default, you need an active relationship. So let's actually, let me right click here again, and let's make this active again. So this should be the optimal setup. You have dimension tables. These tables should be used. You can also call them just plainly filter tables. These are the filter tables, and the filter tables should filter this transaction, so the sales table, right? And if you have this, then you want to have active relationships. You want to have one-to-many relationships. So the one side, the dimension tables, the many side, the fact table, and you want to have a filter direction as single. That is the optimal case. And that's how you should structure your model. So let me click OK. And now the relationship is active again. Also, you might have seen this. If you right click here, of course, you can delete the relationship completely, right? So if I delete it, then yes, I want to delete it. Then this relationship is gone. So you can easily create relationships between tables and make this as create your data model this way. So let me make this active again by simply dragging and dropping it. Okay. So now we have our tables and we have them connected. Also, what you see is if you click somewhere outside, so just inside this model view, somewhere on the gray space here, you see that you have some kind of properties. So for instance, you could turn this on, then you show the database in the header when it is applicable. So if you, for instance, if I hover over this one here, you see that there's a name, a storage mode. So how is this table actually stored in Power BI? Currently it's imported, and you also see a refresh date. And if you would import data from a database, then you can also get information from the database by simply make this active. And then if you hover over a table which comes from a database, you would see additional information. It's not required, but maybe it's of interest to you. And then simply click this on. Show related fields when the card is collapsed. It's just, you can see that you can collapse a table. So just click on collapse here. And now you can see that this table only shows this specific entry. And this entry is shown because the product ID is currently the column which we use in order to create this relationship. If you untick this one here, you see that now also this product ID is gone. So this collapsing tables here, that might be helpful if you have a really, really big model with a lot of tables to save a little bit of space in here. So you don't show all the columns in here or a scroll bar with some columns, but it does not do anything to your model. It's just simply a way to make this view a little bit more, let's say less cluttered if you have a lot of tables, but it does not change anything in the model. It's just there, an option. And pin related fields on top of the cards, that could also be done simply by simply adding if I take this option here, you see that now the product ID is always, in this case for the product table, the first entry. The same is true here for date or for location ID. So all the columns we're going to use for our relationship are now on top. So the first entry in this view. That's all what it does. So it's nothing change the model. It's just really a visual aspect you can enable or disable. Beside this, you can click on tables like that. I can select this table and then I get additional properties for a specific table. So here I also have the option to rename the table. You've seen this in the Power Query editor, but I can also do it here if I want to do that. Simply rename it to a different name. I can give it a description. This might be helpful, for instance, for colleagues of us who also explore the model, and we can give him or her a few additional information about the table we have here. For instance, where's the table coming from? What kind of information is inside? Anything like that. Synonyms could be interesting if you're dealing with Q&A in Power BI, for instance, and you want to refer to a specific table. And let's say the table is called products, but most of your viewers or the report consumers actually have a different name or use a different name, which is common in your organization for this table. Then you can also add this as a synonym here, and Power BI Q&A would pick up the synonym name also for this table if you refer to it. Row label and key column, we can skip this for now. That's not that important. Is hidden. This is something we can enable or disable. This could be interesting if you want to hide a report hide a table in the report view. So if I tick this option is hidden, you see that now the I here, this little I, is also crossed out. The same can be done, by the way, if I uncheck this box by simply clicking on the I. If you tick this option, then also now this table is hidden. And what this means is, if I go back, remember this is the product table, and now if I go back to the report view here, you see that the product table is not shown anymore, right? You can't see it. It's still part of the model, but you cannot see it in here and use it, for instance, to create visualizations or calculations. So if this is something you need, for some reason, you can hide it in here. So let me uncheck this because I would like to see it and maybe use it later on. What you also get as an information here is, if you check advanced here, click on this one, there you can see the storage mode. So normally there currently are these 3 storage modes. In the future there might be another storage mode, but for now you can see it's importing data. It could be direct query or dual mode, which is a combination of both of them. Just to mention this here, even though it's not that important now for our training, but the difference is here, importing the data means we import data directly into Power BI and save it there, right? This means we get the best kind of performance. However, this also means that the data is not real time, which means that in order to see the latest data, if the underlying data has changed, we need to click on refresh in order to, collect the latest data from the underlying data source. On the other hand, if we use direct query, then we have a live connection to the underlying data source, meaning if something changes there, then this change is immediately reflected in our report. But the problem with the direct query is that it is slow. So especially compared to import, the query is slow, and this means the report is often slow. So most often, import mode is the better option, especially if you do not need real-time data and you actually need to refresh the data maybe a few times a day, maybe every 2 hours, or maybe once a day, or once a week, or even once a month, then always use import mode. Okay, so this is it for the storage, which is also available here, and we can see it. And by the way, one additional thing is, if you have imported the data and you try to convert it to direct query, this will not work. So as soon as you have imported the data, you cannot go back to direct query. On the other hand, if you first connected with direct query, you could import it instead. So you can go from direct query to import, but after importing it, you cannot go back. That's just one additional thing I'd like to mention here, just in case this is something you experience maybe in the future. So beside these options, the property pane here for our tables, we also can click on the 3 dots. You might have seen them already. There are also more options, which give us additional options here inside. So for instance, creating DAX calculations in here or adding new columns to the table. But this is something we're going to explore in the next video or next couple of videos. You can refresh data. You can also refresh data up here, but the difference here, that's important, is if you click refresh here, up there in the ribbon bar, this would mean that you refresh all the tables in your model. Now, if you have a lot of tables in your model, that might not be what you want because it takes a little bit of time. And also maybe only one or a few specific tables have been updated. And that's where this option can be used. So you can select the table, for instance, the product table, and click on refresh data. And if you do this, if I click here, then you can see that now only the product table gets refreshed. On the other hand, if I would click refresh here, all the tables would get refreshed. So that's the difference. So next to that, we have the option to edit the query. If you go to edit query, this is the same as simply going to transform data and open the Power Query editor again, if you need to do additional transformations. The manage relationships, you can tick this option. This will then open a window, and there you can see all the relationships which are currently in place. For instance, sales from the customer ID to the customer table, location ID to the location ID from the location table, and so on. And you can also, of course, select one of them. You can delete them. You can edit them. If I click this, and you see exactly the same window as you get if you double click on a relationship. You can also do it this way. As we already know, there are various ways in Power BI to get the same result. So just let me close this. I just want to show you there you can also adjust your relationships. And incremental refresh could be interesting one day. This is just referring to the fact that maybe you have 5 years of data and you want to make sure that you only update the last year, for instance, and not the whole table. Then this could be interesting. But also, it's not a focus of what we currently do here, what we are trying to achieve. But I would like to mention that just in case you hear what is incremental refresh, it just means that you do not update a complete table, but maybe only regarding the time frame. If you have 5 years of data or 10 years of data, you only update the latest year, for instance. That would be an incremental refresh, which can also be done in Power BI. Aggregation tables, this just means that you might have a table which is quite large, and maybe you want to speed up the process. This is something I would refer you to maybe a database administrator or database and admins, because those IT guys can help you actually setting up aggregation tables, and they probably know what I'm talking about, which helps us sometimes to speed up the process. So that means instead of using a real giant big table, which takes a lot of time to do queries with, we can actually speed up the process by using aggregated data. So for instance, instead of showing for each or the sales for each day, maybe we only need monthly data in our report, and then we simply aggregate the data on a monthly level and use this aggregation table, which then can save time and speed up the process and make our report faster. That's what this is about. Delete from model, I mean, we can just delete tables from the model if you want to do that. Of course, I don't want to do this, but this can also be done in here. And hide and report view is the same as simply clicking on the eye. If you do not show it, or do not want to show it, you have seen what this does and how that works. And collapsing or expanding all is just, if you click on this, you can see that now the table collapses again. Or expanding, it's just the same as clicking here. So that's actually what you can set up in here. And then beside clicking on a table, you also have the option to select a specific column. So for instance, if I go to my sales table here, let me just expand it, and then I could say I select the quantity column, for instance. And if you do this, you see that now the property window changes again. So that just gives you the option here to, again, adjust the name for this specific column. You can also add a description, not only for the complete table, if you select the table, but also if you select a column, you can do that for a column. You can also add synonyms here. And this again is for the Q&A feature in Power BI. You can display it in a folder. What is meant by that? You see that currently all those columns here are part of the sales table, but I could say this is, for instance, here I could use a folder. I could say financials, financial, for instance, financials, to spell it correctly, financials, like that. And if I press enter, you now see that inside the sales table, we have a folder, which is called financials. And in this folder, we have the quantity. So again, this is just for structuring. It does not change the table itself. It's just an easier way, maybe if you have a lot of columns in a specific table and you want to structure it, right? So it's easier for you to spot and to find the specific columns you have here. And if you want to remove it, just go in here, remove it completely. So let me just click on it. Let me select it, remove it, press enter. And then you see that now the folder is gone. It's kind of similar to what we've seen in the Power Query editor, right? But this time just for the table itself. And beside this, you can also check this is hidden. This just means if I tick this option, you see that now only this specific column is now hidden in the report. So if I go in here, inside my sales, I would not see quantity in here. It's not visible. Still part of the table, but it's not visible. So it's the same as hiding a complete table, but this time it's just one column of this table. And beside this, under formatting, you can also specify the data type. In this case, it's whole number. And you can also specify here the format. So there are a lot of formats in here for numerical data, for instance. And if you really want to customize this format, you can also go in here, go to custom, and this allows you here to specify a custom format. Right? It's the same as in Excel. You might be familiar with it, that you could, for instance, specify that positive numbers are written normally and negative numbers are, for instance, in parentheses, anything like that. This can be specified here. And if you want to learn what kind of formatting options you can apply, simply click this Learn More, because this gives you then, or gets you directly to the Power BI documentation, and there you can find it. But to give you a sneak preview, it's kind of similar to what you can do in Excel, where you also have the option to format specific data entries the way you want it. So let me go back to whole number, because I would like to keep it the way it is. I just wanted to mention this. If it's a percentage number, you can check this box, then it's a percentage. And if you want to add 1,000 separators to it, also check this box, and then this is enabled by default. It's just formatting actually for the specific value in here. So that's that. And then summarized by, this is the default summarization, which we have seen. Remember that I showed you in the first report that you can, for instance, set the aggregation we used for the price. We did then an aggregation of average, but the default was sum. And if you want to change the default aggregation for numerical columns, you can do that here. Instead of using sum, you could, for instance, use average. And then whenever you drag the quantity in the report view on a visual, then by default, the first aggregation would be average and not sum. You can still change it, as we have seen already, but you can set here a default aggregation if you want to do that. And also you can set a default to none. Then the quantity by default would not be aggregated at all. Also can be specified here. And yeah, that's it. Again, a very long video, I know, but this is really crucial. It's crucial to understand that after you have prepared and worked so hard on shaping your data, on cleaning your data, then before you can really create your powerful report, which gives insights to your organization and helps a lot of people in your organization, before you can do that, you need to make sure that your data model is set up correctly. So that you have all the tables, they are in the right structure, and especially that the relationships are set up correctly. And only then, if you're done with this, then you can go inside the report view in here, and now you can get started with creating your awesome report. Okay? So that's it for this video. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks a lot for watching and also for following along. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.